HVAC 360 is brought to you today by new on the shelves at Lefty's Construction Mart is Schedule Dynamite. Deadlines piling up? Need to clear some breathing room in your schedule? Then reach for this non-reactive and TSA-approved amalgam of organizational destruction. How's it work, you ask? Just unscrew the top of this 2-ounce jar and spill it on the nearest Gantt chart, manpower report, or pile of desktop paperwork and watch the chaos-clearing transformation begin. Schedule Dynamite. Don't leave home without it. Hey, what's up? Welcome back. This is episode number 101. Matt Nelson here, your host for HVAC 360, helping you be the best and the brightest in the field of HVAC. How do we do that? Yes, Matt, how do we do that? We do that by sharing lessons learned. We do that by talking with industry experts. But we don't stop there. No, we do not stop there. I want to encourage you to double down on your HVAC knowledge and go right now to HVAC360.com. and sign up for the newsletter. It's a growing community of people just like you who want their HVAC knowledge with a little shot of refrigerant on the side. So, what's up for this week? This week, great interview. Definitely stay tuned. We talk with Jeff Traylor. Jeff, just so you know, has been involved with the building commissioning industry for a long time. So ever since I've been going to ASHRAE Society meetings, I try to go to the subcommittee, the building commissioning subcommittee. Anybody can attend those. They just pop in and listen to them. It's a committee that's typically very packed, so a lot of people there. But every time, I'd always see, Jeff sitting at the table, just being one of the people kind of, in charge. And any sort of commissioning thing around ASHRAE, I'd always see Jeff there. So I was so happy that I actually got a chance to sit down and talk with Jeff about building commissioning, and we give a little bit of a 101 on building commissioning. So sit back and enjoy the show. This week we're talking with Jeff Traylor. How you doing today, Jeff?
Doing marvelous. How about yourself, Matt?
I am doing excellent. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jeff's been a long time commissioning advocate. He's been involved in a lot of the commissioning standards, a lot of commissioning committees, even part of the, OP, I'm going to get it wrong. Was the OP?
Operation Performance Management Certification Process. Right.
So he's part of that certification exam subcommittee. So he's really involved in just about everything commissioning. So I guess how did you get started in commissioning in general, Jeff?
Well, as we discussed, it was I had a electrical construction design build firm in Houston, and we were doing a lot of projects for offshore oil platforms around the world. And when you put something together and then it's going to be millions of dollars per hour, if it's not working right, you make sure that it's all been through its paces and tested and is fully and functional, operational before you send it out. And so the processes and procedures that we set up there are very similar to what has ended up now being in the commissioning process. That was my start.
So now, I guess a lot of people associate commissioning with shipbuilding and things like that. And I guess obviously offshore oil rigs again kind of fall into the same category of if it's not working, not only is it a waste of resources and you're losing out on revenue, but you're not real close to extra parts or being able to kind of get this thing put together right.
That's very true. If you run into a problem and you're on the North Slope of Alaska and the storms are starting to come in for the winter, or if you're in the North Atlantic in the North Sea and the winter's coming in on one of these things, you don't have a lot of time, and it takes months sometimes to get parts and pieces shipped to places and get them installed, or the cost can be astronomical to fly. We actually had to fly a huge skid-mounted unit in one of the largest cargo planes in the world because it got delayed for some parts that were not coming in on schedule. And so avoiding those things can be substantial savings to the owner.
Oh, absolutely. Now you were, I mean, obviously you were kind of like you mentioned, you were involved in building commissioning before it was really in vogue in the commercial commercial construction industry. Now, right. There are many certifications out there, many classes, courses that one could take, and one of the more, I guess. I don't know if it predates a lot of them, but one of them is the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They have a commissioning program, commissioning certification out there, and I understand you were one of the instructors of that?
That's correct. I got involved with that when one of the other instructors dropped out in 1999, and they invited me to replace him. I was just getting involved with ASHRAE and the committees and everything with that at that time, but it was very educational both to myself. They always say that if you really want to know a subject, teach it to somebody else, and I found that to be absolutely true in this case. And I continued working that class and teaching it several times a year from 1999 till the summer of 2013. During that time, we also organized the commissioning certification program, and myself, and I was one of the 4 first people to take the exam and pass it and get the CXAP certification.
Awesome. Now, I think going into that, being an instructor, being able to see all those different, people, taking the course for the first time. What do you think is some of the most common misconceptions that people have about building commissioning?
I'd say that absolutely the most common one that I have witnessed is everybody believes that commissioning is something you start about 2 days before the building's turned over to the owner. Commissioning is a process, and at that point, the later you wait in the construction process, and I'm talking about design and construction, the less value you will get from the commissioning process. About 90% of the savings and improvements in the owners to meet the owner's project requirements comes early in the design and pre-design parts of the process.
Now, I guess, obviously, I think that I've experienced that as well. Getting in there early, which is not always easy. The way that people, understand it. Even I think engineers understand it a little bit better than architects and owners, which don't at all. I think it's a little bit easier now, and I think that with 90.1 kind of being the standard energy code requiring commissioning. But it still doesn't go into the explicit nature of getting commissioning started in the pre-design. I think one of the new things with LEED that I saw with this latest version was that they actually took the design review from the enhanced credit into the prerequisite, which was good because that means that you're telegraphing to everybody that you have to get the commissioning into a project in the design. And I think that at least, since a lot of people look to LEED and they associate LEED and commissioning a lot, I think that kind of would be a good indicator to get commissioning involved earlier in the project. So
no question whatsoever. One of the most successful projects that I've been involved in was a conference center for the University of Texas, AT&T Conference Center, which is on their main campus in downtown Austin. and we got involved in the very, very early stages of pre-design, and were able to save the owner millions of dollars in design concepts and stuff that became aware by trying requirements early on in the process. And we ended up finishing that job on schedule, and that schedule had been set for 5 years ahead. Now, how many people know construction schedules are generally very flexible, or end up being very flexible? And to accomplish that and get it in, so that they could open that conference center, the hotel portion of it, for the beginning of the football season, was a major accomplishment.
Yeah, no, I mean, the schedules are very. You deal with delays, and that's the thing that kills a schedule is the delays, and you can't really predict the weather. I think it'd probably be a little bit easier in Texas than it would be in say, the northern climates up here in Ohio. But I think that you're absolutely right. And I just like to highlight you saved millions of dollars, and I'm sure that far outweighed the entire commissioning fee for that project.
Oh yeah, no question about it.
So the payback was negative. It was before even the project was started. You saved the money that commissioning cost.
That's correct.
So when you have this course, for example, the University of Wisconsin Madison course on commissioning, what could somebody expect? And not like it would vary too much from whether it be NEB or whether it be ASHRAE or whatever. But what would you expect to learn from a kind of a 101 course in commissioning?
I think you would learn how and why the commissioning process, when properly implemented, will be successful, and what can make the difference between a successful commissioning project and what may a project that doesn't quite meet the standards or meet the owner's desires and wishes. And a lot of it is understanding how the different forces and pieces of guidelines, particularly Guideline 0, can be applied to the commissioning process, and what the benefits are and how to apply these things. Things like the design review portion, one of the things that we did was conduct a informal design review on a set of plans, and then very quick, just doesn't take very long really, but 1 hour review of some plans, and then come back with comments and what did you find, how did you find it, what made this process of how to conduct a design review effective. We did this at a special course for people at the Miami-Dade School District, and they were going through, we said, well, bring one of your sets of plans and we'll use that for the design review test or training part of the project. And we were about halfway through the hour and a half, I believe, that we had designated for that, and two of the people got up and ran out of the classroom. And as we were starting the classroom discussion, everything, they came back and we said, what happened? I said, well, the set of plans that we just reviewed had been reviewed for over 3 months by different departments within the school district, and they discovered during our quick design review that they had left out the parking lot. Nobody had caught that. And it's a matter of how you go about looking at the review. If all of us have ever looked at plans, you can get into the minutia of it and overlook big things like, oh, where's the parking lot, or the big issues. And if you go in and you're looking for things that are not in compliance with the owner's project requirements, you're very quickly and easily get down to the nitty-gritty and get it back. And one of the things we say is that you do not have to review everything on there. If you find a substantial number of issues in the design review that do not meet with the owner's project requirements, as soon as you've gotten a significant number of these things, it's time to say, stop, send it back. You guys review all this. Here's the things we found. You go look for the rest of it and come back to us.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, especially engineers, who are looking to get into commissioning, kind of, I think, sometimes misinterpret the design review as being more of a peer review.
And that's not
right. You're not getting into the numbers. You're not challenging other engineers. You're looking for things that, like you said, are in line with the owner's project requirements, and just things that whether it's the maintenance staff, just thinking about them.
Oh yeah, and planning for operations and maintenance staff and everything is a major part of commissioning. In the past, as everybody knows, for years you started the job, you designed it, and you built it. And some days, months, years after the completion of the job, somebody put together a bunch of pieces of catalogs, put it in a box, and sent it to them, and said, "Here's your owner's manuals." And most of that was sales literature, had nothing to do with it, and the people had never had any real training on how to operate major pieces of complex equipment like chiller and air systems and BAS systems and this sort of thing. And by setting up a directional controlled program for training and trying to get the owners and everybody to record and save the training for playback to new employees in the future, it made a tremendous difference in the operations of the buildings.
So I guess we got the design portion of it. I mean, as far as what other things would you expect from the course? I mean, as far as learning, functional, pre-functional checks.
Yeah, learn how to create construction checklists, and also how to create functional tests and what's important, what you need to be looked for, how to set these up so that they are, again, meeting the owner's project requirements to make sure that it's all going to function and operate properly. And it's not a difficult process, but it's very, that's the one place where the engineering brain needs to kick in and be looking at the best ways to what is the equipment is designed and operated and to do, and how to foresee that outcome and measure it and find out whether it is actually doing it or not.
Excellent. So, in your years of teaching the course, was there something that you felt that, I mean, obviously you didn't write it, you were just teaching it. What things that, do courses like this maybe necessarily not prepare students for, or, you think you might be added to it?
In that course we continually evaluated the course and made changes and updates and stuff along within every year. I would say that the course changed over significantly and improved to meet the things that because everybody that was involved in the instructors were also involved in doing commissioning. So we were applying the course and seeing what the results were and what improvements could be made, and updating the course itself to meet these requirements. And also, at the same time, this was in the 2000s when we were writing Guideline 1 and Guideline 0 for X-ray, and then started on Guideline 202. And so as we were writing and creating these guidelines, we were taking what we were learning in the field and what we were learning in writing the courses and applying it and improving the classes so that somebody that went through it were pretty much up to date with whatever the latest was at that time and had enough education in the process to be able to carry on from there.
So now I've heard, or I've been told in the past, I mean, there's this I mean, I guess a school of thought that you can't. I mean, a school of thought around the experience of commissioning. A lot of commissioning. It's like the chicken and the egg conundrum. Do you commit? You learn to commission. You get out there and you learn to commission, and then you can be an expert, or do you have to be an expert first and then go out and commission? How do can somebody brand new go out and commission a building, I guess is the question.
Somebody new to the construction industry, I think, would be challenged. I think the people that are probably do the best job at it are what would be termed polymath, people who are familiar with a lot of different aspects and have had some experience in all phases, or at least somewhat knowledgeable. To take someone who is, say, a design engineer and has spent 4 or 5 years sitting at a computer doing designs and throwing them out there without any guidance and saying, hey, here's the process, follow this and commission a building, you would get it done, but not to the quality that I would expect. Because there's so many things to look for that are very subtle and would be probably more time consuming for someone who is not quite as knowledgeable to pick up. Now, not to say that they cannot do it, but I would say that the job would better be done by someone who has knowledge of both the design side and the construction side in the industry.
So if somebody approached you and said, hey, you know what, because I get this question, a bunch of times, hey, how do I get involved in building commissioning? I mean, what's to you, what's the best avenue for that?
I would say that being involved in construction project management would be probably one of the best if you have an education and be able to do particularly design build work so that you're involved in the project from beginning to end and kind of see what you started out to do, how it ended up, and what improvements you could have made and things that you can see as you go along. Is that making sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that that gets you the kind of all sides of it. Whether or not you're involved in the engineering, at least you're involved in people. At least who's doing the engineering in it, like a design build scenario, and then you get you get exposure to the actual installation with the contractors, and then if you're dealing with any sort of scheduling or conflicts, at least you get the exposure to that. From that side,
Right. Yep.
Which is
exactly.
It's kind of unique. I mean, most of the people that I've seen either that are in the industry are either come from basically one of three slots. They're either coming from the engineering side, they're coming from the test and balance side, or they're coming from the controls side. And
yep.
I think your polymath kind of example is they're usually missing one or more of those areas, but
right.
Not to say that they won't do a great job, but they probably can't do the best job that they possibly can. And if you're in that position, maybe it's maybe you try to focus on those other two to try to shore up your knowledge.
Yeah, that would probably be helpful. I think that somebody that is not had a lot of experience with the construction industry from beginning to end, if they worked with someone on a project or two that had and learns how to look at it, it's like I think we've all known. You see maybe these detective movies or something on TV, where they come in and they look and they see things that you as a just an average person or something would walk into a room and okay, yeah, everything looks good. Someone who is trained to look for certain things can spot them right off, and it just goes better, and they have fewer mistakes and stuff in there.
Right. And it's that training part that usually gets people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like can you start before you get training? And it's usually there's some sort of issue that you have on a particular project that all of a sudden it's like, okay, so you look for that issue on future projects and you get enough
Right.
of those, and that's the kind of the sixth sense you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's a matter of this. It's kind of hard to explain, and like I said, it's just a matter of knowing how to look at things. One of the things that I've learned, and just watching this, goes back to these stupid TV shows. But you see these ones for CSI and those sort of things. They walk into a room and they have their flashlights on, and they don't turn on the room lights. They take their flashlights and shine them around in the room. Well, that focuses their spot, looking at where that light is, so that they're focused on that little area rather than trying to look at the whole thing at once. And so they're less likely to miss things if they have a process and can focus in on certain areas and say, yep, this is things I need to look for.
So obviously, I guess there are some best practices out there, and you've alluded to a couple of them. But in general, what are some best practices for commissioning authorities?
I'd say that one of the best practices is to look at the guidelines. You got to remember that the standards are minimum requirements. The guidelines are best practices. And look at the guidelines, be familiar with them, and try to follow the processes that are outlined or described in the ASHRAE guidelines for commissioning and in the other industry standards for building envelopes and fire alarm systems and some of these many other systems. But Guideline 0 covers the commissioning process for all of these things. Guideline 1, which we know is for HVAC equipment. And so if you take those guidelines and these other industry guidelines, the ASHRAE guidelines and other industry guidelines, and look at them and look and apply those, and everybody's going to have a little bit different take in the way that they go about it. But those guidelines were written by people who are in the industry and had spent a lot of time and effort, and you're getting the benefit of the knowledge of a group of subject matter experts.
Now, you mentioned 202. That's a ASHRAE standard, correct?
Correct.
And what is that? Can you tell people a little bit about the 202?
Well, that 202 is the minimum standards for commissioning. It's somewhat like, for the people that are familiar with the National Electrical Code. National Electrical Code tells you here are the minimum standards that you can use to build or create a project or something like that, the electrical side of it. If you want to know best practices and everything, you go to IEEE and look at a lot of the stuff that's in the IEEE and other codes and standards and schooling to get it in depth. A minimum standard is what's the least I can do to get by with and say that I've done the job, and that's what 202 basically describes is what is the minimum acceptable standard for commissioning of a project.
Now, is that going to get referenced in 90.1 and things like that? Is that the intent, or is that?
I'm not sure exactly where that path is right this moment. Okay. I couldn't answer that. I would say that it's going to be the standard is probably going to be referenced in building codes, and local authorities having jurisdiction are going to be primarily looking for 202. Owners may want to go further and say, all right, I want it done right. I want it done to the higher level of profession, and go to the guidelines.
All right, and that kind of would have been right, the process of 202 being the minimum, then guideline 0 or guideline 1 being the for the HVAC. Gotcha.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I guess any other stories that you can share with us about commissioning and your long tenure doing commissioning? Anything that stands out? Any examples that you like to tell your students about as far as commissioning goes?
One of them would be the absolute critical issues of creating an owner's project requirements. I was working on a small hospital project in north central Ohio, and they had called us in, and the job was about 50% construction complete when we got involved in doing the commissioning for it. And one of the early things that we kept saying, well, we need to have an owner's project requirements. Well, we haven't got time. We're too busy building. We don't have time to do this. Okay, I finally got them to sit down, have a meeting, and we just were able to catch a few people from the owner and a few people. It was a hospital, so we got a couple of people from the staff, the contractor, one of the design team, and us, and we started a owner's project requirements workshop, and somewhat loosely aligned with the guideline 0 requirements for an owner's project requirement workshop, and sat down. And as we were going through this, we weren't probably 30 or 45 minutes into this, and one of the people spoke up and said, "Where did all this stuff come from? We never talked about any of this when we were doing it, and this is all stuff that we need to talk about and have involved." So by not having a design owner's project requirements, they had overlooked huge gaps in the design and construction of their hospital. We were able to catch some of it, but a lot of it they just said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. We're just going to have to go home. But they missed that opportunity. And this is one of the reasons that the owner's project requirements workshop should be held very early in the design process and maybe repeated later on in smaller portions as the project moves forward, because the owner's project requirements is a living document. I mean, owners come along. We were doing a laboratory for Duke University Hospital. No, this was just for the university. And the halfway through this $450 million laboratory, they decided that, in these areas here where we said we were going to have general labs, now we're going to convert them into vivariums, animal holding facilities and testing facilities. That's a whole different ballgame. So we had to revise the owner's project requirements to meet these new areas, because that was not written in there to begin with. So owner's project requirements is not just something you write and put it down and put it away and forget it. It's something that needs to be referred to and utilized and updated as the project moves forward.
Right, and I guess again in the case of the vivarium, I mean that's not, it's easy to make changes and not necessarily inform everybody, but if you get it in the owner's project requirements and then you redistribute it and you say, hey, here's the changes to this, how does this affect your systems? I mean, from the HVAC systems to the electrical systems to I mean that's major. I mean, we, talking about, vivariums and sound, vivariums are very susceptible to any sort of extra, vibrations, noises, you can stress out the test subjects, so to speak. And that's not cheap. I mean, they pay top dollar for, each batch of, the animals that they're testing.
Well, yeah, I mean, a single rat in some of these vivariums is worth $150,000-$200,000, and some of them as much as $1 million, because of the many generational studies that have been done. Those things, rats have better pedigrees than probably anybody on earth, because they know everything about those, and all that documentation. If something happens and that rat dies, they have to start over again. And so it's very critical. It's an amazing process.
Yeah.
And another thing, talking about things that happen on projects, on this same project, we were going through and they were hanging drywall before they even got thinking about putting the curtain walls on the job. And I said, wait a minute. And it was raining and cold, and the drywall was just soaking up moisture all over the place. And I said, hey, what are you going to do about this? Because it's going to take months to ever get all this stuff straightened out. And the contractor ended up having to go back, and not go back, but stopped installing any more drywall, close the building in, and put in dehumidification to try to pull the moisture out of the walls that they had already hung. And if we hadn't caught that, it would have been a major problem as we moved on down the road with that job.
Right. That's it's that leading to mold, leading to issues. Especially in the healthcare situation.
Yeah.
That could have easily been a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. It's like things like that
exactly.
that people don't think all the way through. They're just
right.
Head down. I've been told to finish this project. I got to finish it, and they're driven by schedule, and it doesn't work like that. You can't always do that.
And again, it's one of those things, being familiar with construction process and materials and stuff, of things that are really not in the purview of someone who is normally doing commissioning. But we were able to identify that the drywall they were hanging was not moisture and mildew mold resistant by the color of it. And they were putting it in some of the elevator shafts, but that was it. And so I said, hey, what about all the rest of this?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and it's not like you have to be experts in drywall, but you are able to kind of understand. Okay, that should be applicable to this X, Y, and Z, and you can just think about it, and you can ask questions.
Exactly.
So, well, hey, you know what? I appreciate you spending the time and talking with us, Jeff.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm always available to discuss and try to shed some light on some of the aspects of commissioning that some people may not see right off the top of their head.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Thanks again for our guest, Jeff Traylor, for taking the time to chat with us. Check out the show notes for things and links that I mentioned during the interview. You can find show notes at HVAC360.com/101 for the 101st episode. That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. If you know somebody who is needs more information or was looking for information about building commissioning, why don't you take this episode and pass it along? If you're not a subscriber, again, go to HVAC360.com, sign up for the mailing list, and join that growing community of people just like you for that weekly double dose of goodness. And I'd be honored if you would go to Apple iTunes or the Apple Podcasts and go and leave a 5-star review, leave some comments, and I'll give you a shout out in the next show if you do that. So that's a wrap for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Matt Nelson, helping you be the best and the brightest in the field of HVAC. And as always, know what you build and share what you know.